you so much for coming out, everybody. It's so nice to see this room packed with people, familiar faces, a lot of friends. It just feels good to know that we're on the right track and that we're running programs that interest people. And Alexandre, this is not his first time here. I think was it December of 2012? It was December of 2012, not long after we started the committee, that Alexandre gave a talk, and I still hear people talking about it. They're like, remember that talk a while ago in the back room on sound? Well, you know, okay, well, here we are again tonight. So let me first read the official bio. For those of you who don't know, I imagine there are a lot of friends in the audience, but for those of you that don't know, Alexandre Tannous, he's a musician, an educator, a composer, and an ethnomusicologist. He holds 4 degrees in music theory, composition, music education, and ethnomusicology. As an ethnomusicologist, he's conducted fieldwork for 17 years in over 40 countries around the world. For the past 8 years, he's been researching the therapeutic and esoteric properties of sound from 3 different perspectives: Western scientific, Eastern philosophical, and shamanic societal beliefs, all to gain a deeper understanding of how sound has been used to affect human consciousness. The search has led him to the intersection of where art, science, and spirituality meet. The material he transmits about sound is based on thorough research over many years, observations he made during his fieldwork, scientific studies, and data collected from thousands of people he has worked with doing sound therapy, some of which I imagine are here tonight. This has led him to a deeper understanding of how sound reveals and unlocks hidden powers we have within us to promote profound inner changes and healing. I'd also like to mention that the talk tonight's being recorded and it's going to be on YouTube, in case you'd like to see it again or share it with some friends. I would imagine just by searching for his name, you'll probably find it, right? Alexandre Tannous, or on his website. And I also just wanted to acknowledge Alexandre because, I mean, besides being a really dear friend, he's actually been very helpful to us as a committee throwing events here, because he introduced us to Dennis McKenna, that we've had here twice, and through Dennis McKenna we got to know Graham Hancock, who's also been here twice. So I just wanted to acknowledge that as well. He's here sharing this with us tonight. He's just all around great person, as you know. Thank you.
Hello. Great to see all of you. Thank you for being here, and I'd like to thank the Art and Technology Committee, Dave, Rob, and the rest of the team, and the National Arts Club. It's always great to come here and give talks or to watch other talks. I'd like to start with this quote. Sometimes people hold a core belief that is very strong. When they are presented with evidence that works against that belief, the new evidence cannot be accepted. It would create a feeling that is extremely uncomfortable, called cognitive dissonance. And because it is so important to protect the core belief, they will rationalize, ignore, and even deny anything that doesn't fit in with the core belief. Frantz Fanon, psychiatrist and philosopher. So there may be some things that are gonna go against your belief. All I ask you is just stay open-minded, and most importantly, research it. Don't take my words for granted. Don't take anybody's words for granted. The transformation is when we all do the work. Okay. I first would like to talk a little bit about mathematics in nature. Usually I talk about mathematics in nature for a longer segment, but here I'm gonna do just the necessary to build on it, because this whole talk is built around certain mathematics in nature. So we'll start with Fibonacci sequence. I know most of you know it, but for some of you who don't know it, the Fibonacci sequence or series is a sequence of numbers with surprisingly useful applications in botany and other natural sciences. Beginning with 2 ones, each new term is generated as the sum of the previous 2. 1 plus 1 equals 2, 2 plus 1 equals 3, 2 plus 3 equals 5, and so on. The 13th century mathematician Leonardo of Pisa born circa 1170 and died at some point after 1240, also known as Fibonacci, discovered the sequence but did not explore its uses, which have turned out to be wide and various. For example, the number of petals in most types of flowers and numbers involved in branching and seed formation patterns come from the Fibonacci sequence. The ratio of any two successive terms approaches the value of the golden ratio, which is 1.16 and goes on to infinity as the terms become large. So this is a nautilus shell, and you see the 2 1 starting in the middle, adding 2, 2 plus 1 equals 3, and the chamber of the nautilus becomes bigger and bigger. This is the shell. Same with the petals. Same with the pine cone and sunflower. This is where I want us to get to and focus on. This is the most important part of the talk, and everything will be built on it. A lot of these excerpts that I'll be reading are from a book that I'm writing slowly, because I'm continuing the research and working with people. So it's not going to be out at any point soon, unfortunately. Harmonic overtones. An overtone is any frequency higher than the fundamental frequency of a sound. The fundamental and the overtones together are called partials. Harmonics are partials whose frequencies are integer multiples of the fundamental. These overlapping terms are variously used when discussing the acoustic behavior of musical instruments. When a resonant system such as a blown pipe or plucked string is excited, a number of overtones may be produced along with the fundamental tone. In simple cases, such as for most musical instruments, the frequencies of these tones are the same as or close to the harmonics. The human vocal tract is able to produce highly variable structure of overtones called formants, which define different vowels. Mathematicians call them the harmonic series, musicians call them overtone series, and physicists, acousticians specialized in sound, call them partials. So basically, this is the vibration of a string. When we pluck it, it vibrates as a whole, but at the same time, it vibrates in divisions of 2, division of 3, 4, 5 to infinity. Every time it vibrates, it emits, depending on the division, emits a harmonic. These are the vibrations superimposed. So, here we have a C. Let's say you're plucking the string on open and it's giving you a C note. And this first harmonic, which is a note that you can play by lightly touching the string in the middle, dividing the string into 2 equal parts. I'm sure you've seen guitar players or violinists or other string players playing harmonics. When you lightly touch it and pluck it, it gives a light and eerie note. This is the harmonic. And we call this a node. And these are nodes, all of them. And the harmonics, for example, this G here can be generated on this node and this node. And oddly enough, in this node, the string is not vibrating, it's still actually. So this is a C, and then this C is an octave higher than this one, which is 8 notes apart for those of you who don't know music. And G is a fifth higher from this C, and this C is 2 octaves higher, and it goes on to infinity. Here we have only 16 partials. So here we have the same idea, but depicted on musical staff, but you have the notes on the bottom. And we're going to listen to an example of how these harmonics sound like, starting with the fundamental. gets more interesting and complicated, actually. So, once again, if you're not familiar with music and music reading, you have the notes on the bottom. So, some of these notes may sound out of tune to some of you. Well, the reason why, that's because of these fluctuating integer numbers that are on top. So, something happened in the 16th century that became known much later on as the equal temperament, which is basically the act of dividing the 12 half steps in the Western octave into equidistant half steps. So the half step is the smallest division of sound in the West, which is the distance between white key and the adjacent black key on the piano. For example, C to C sharp to D, and so on, totaling to 12 half steps. Before the equal temperament, these half steps were not equidistant. What do I mean by this? Well, physicists, acousticians actually specifically, who are specialized in studying sound and sound vibration, divide the octave into 1200 cents. Cent is a unit for logarithmic measurement. And before the equal temperament, these half steps were not all equidistant. The half steps were not all 100 cents. So nature had a different tuning for us, and we adjusted it to be able to transpose pieces of music from any key to any other key. Because before the equal temperament, you could only transpose a piece of music, say, in the key of C major, for someone who wants to sing that song and has a high voice or a low voice and that key is not suitable. With the non-equal temperament, you can only transpose it to neighboring keys. For the musicians, you can only transpose it to a key that has up to 4 flats or sharps in the key signature. Anything beyond that, the piece of music will start to sound out of tune. So to work around this, they figured out a way to quantize these half steps and make them all equidistant. This is when Bach wrote the very famous work, Das wohltemperierte Klavier, the well-tempered clavier. Back then there was no piano. They used to tune harpsichords. There were only organs and harpsichords. And the musicians would always tune the harpsichord based on what key he or she is playing in. So with the equal temperament, musicians were able to really play in any key, and Bach was thoroughly delighted by this idea, because for the first time you can play in any key on a harpsichord that you tune once. And this is when he wrote 2 books of preludes and fugues in every major and minor key. He did this twice. There's book 1 and book 2. So what you're looking at here are the notes with the fluctuating integer numbers. That means this G right here is plus 2 cents if you were to compare it with keyboard or piano that's perfectly tuned but in equal temperament. So this G, as it occurs in the harmonic series, this is basically what you're looking at, same as the other one, they're in their natural intonation. And notice that all of the notes, aside from the fundamental frequency C, and every time this fundamental frequency occurs in a series, every harmonic fluctuates. So this is plus 2 cents, this E is minus 14 cents, this G is plus 2 cents, this B flat is minus 31. So some of you have heard of the blue note. The blue note is a note that's played flat on purpose. Now, why would one do that? Well, we don't know. First of all, blue notes are found in every culture and not just in North American culture. It somehow strikes a chord within us. It moves us, even though it's out of tune. But even when you don't know the physics of sound, we're still able to feel things intuitively. So blue notes come from this flattened B flat. It's minus 31 cents. That's quite flat. Anyone would notice it. Most people would notice fluctuation anywhere around plus minus 4 cents or plus minus sixth sense, depending on the ear of the person and if they're trained in music or not. So notice that some of them fluctuate dramatically. This one is minus 49 cents. Certain cultures have microtones, half flats and half sharps. I'll talk about them later on. This is where they come from. This is the most magical formula that we, through intuition, build harmonic systems on it, and scales and modes and so on. Here's once again the harmonic series, and notice as we move up, but the recording of the harmonics is only up to the 16th partial. Here we have 20. And keep in mind that this goes on to infinity. But also, notice how much the interval changed, starting with an octave, and then a fifth, and then a fourth, a third. This is a major third and minor third. And here we switch to treble clef, which is a higher register. This is why there's a drop. And going on, the intervals start to shrink. And the difference between one interval and another is the golden mean. This is why we talked about Fibonacci series, the 1.61803398 to infinity. So this magical number occurs in not only plants and animals and human beings, and many artists have used it in constructing pieces of art or monuments, and cosmologists use it a lot. It's truly an enigmatic number. It has been called the golden mean, the golden proportion, and so on. So once again, I'm going to play the harmonic series, and I'll point at the notes at the same time. Okay. Gets trickier. This is the equal temperament frequency and the harmonic series frequency. So here you have the approximate difference between the two, and you see that they fluctuate. Now for human beings that might not be too much, just a little bit, no one's going to notice it, no one's going to hear it. Well, it seems like it does make a difference, and we're going to expand on this later on, even though we don't directly hear it. And here's another example of how things are really when you introduce mathematics to sound. So this is the unison, and these are the ratio and the inverse, the fraction value and the inverse value. So intervals have names. A unison is C to C, a minor second is the half step C to C sharp, major second is C to D, and so on, up until you reach the octave. So now I'm going to demonstrate a video of a visual depiction of the sound of Himalayan singing bowl. We recorded one of my bowls, and basically what you'll hear is the entire sound played together as you would hear the Himalayan bowl being struck. And here you have two channels, left channel, right channel. So first you hear the entire spectrum together, and then you hear individual harmonics singled out, just so that you hear what is in the sound. Now you might wonder, why are these harmonics there? It's a very good question. Well, sound has a color. So the different harmonics that you hear in people's voices, in musical instruments, in any sound coming in nature, is not just one sound. It may seem to you as if it's one sound, but once you start doing spectral analysis, you realize that, oh, there are many notes in there. Unless you start playing instruments such as Himalayan singing bowls, gongs, didgeridoos, or diaphonic singing, overtone singing, then you start to hear these overtones, but you might not hear all of them all together, but you can start to get a sense that there is more than one or two or three. So in this singing bowl, you're going to hear a few tones. The combination of all of them would design the tone color, the sound. In the same way that when an artist is painting a sky in specific kind of blue hues, the artist would start mixing different colors to give you that specific bluish, grayish blue or dark blue or various things. So you mix various colors to create what seemed to be one color, but it's actually composed of many different pigments of different colors. Sound is in the same way. So when you're hearing a sound of a violin, let's say C played on a violin, that same C, same register C on clarinet would sound different. What makes a difference is that the fact that these overtones are present to certain levels of strength or weakness, culminating into specific tone color or timbre, that would allow you to hear clearly one sound from another. This is something that's very important that we use every day. Sound is used in a very effective way to navigate in the world, to recognize things. Not only that, but also to get a good idea of the space and distance based on things around us. So I'm going to play the example here. So once again, you'll hear the entire sound as it is, and then individual harmonics, and then at the end you'll hear all of them played together. So that's what's in sound. And you can do this with anything, even when you're not hearing things. And I'm going to show you some slides of other instruments. This is what sound looks like of a gong. So every horizontal line is a harmonic. And you can see how close to each other they get, and they go on pretty high. If you notice here that you were hearing more than one note, but you probably were not hearing all of these. It's so hard, even for a trained ear. So this is a shruti box, which is an instrument that sounds like an accordion or like a harmonium. You basically pump it with air from here, and you can adjust these slots to open different notes or close them. And this is what a C on a shruti box looks like, the lower C. Every horizontal line is one harmonic. And notice once again how the interval shrinks as you go higher and higher. And this is what it sounds like. This is a G. And C and G together. There must be dozens of them. Really, the high ones are very, very close to each other. And if you add the octave higher C, so C, low C, G, and then octave higher, you have plenty of them. And this is what a sound of a didgeridoo looks like. Sound of native Indian flute with certain trills and descending and ascending notes. So this means that we're doing a little trill here and dropping a note, trill and dropping a note, and lower note and ascending. So less harmonics than the shruti box, but you may not necessarily hear any of these harmonics. Maybe some people hear one, but most people would hear it as just one sound. So these are the different colors that you find in it. This is a classical transverse flute, just a normal orchestral flute. And notice that you have much less harmonics. This is my air conditioner. They're everywhere. But you can hear the harmonics in the air conditioner, just like a vacuum cleaner. But any engine, any machine has harmonics, and you can measure them, even if they're really quiet. you can still measure them. Painting emotions with music. One way in which Western and non-Western musical cultures differ involves the construction and use of scales and modes. A scale is any set of ascending or descending musical notes ordered by pitch and spanning an octave. The first note of the scale is called the tonic, and it acts as the tonal center. Scales can employ different intervallic structures that change the overall sound. This is what we mean when we refer to a scale as major, minor, blues, pentatonic, and so on. Songs are composed around the use of any scale or combination of scales. So we tend to think of a minor scale sounding sad or romantic versus major scale sounding happy, easygoing, joyful. That's basically the difference. Similar to a scale, a mode can also be perceived as a group of notes moving in a stepwise motion. Notes within modes, however, may be explored in various ways with different combinations and probabilities in a way that would bring out the mode's ethos. Ethos is a Greek word referring to the distinguishing character, personality, or sentiments of a mode. If we were to ask a performer of Western music to sing or play a specific scale, he or she might do so in an ascending or descending stepwise motion. However, when we ask a musician from a non-Western culture to perform a specific mode, we would likely receive an improvised melody or fragment that paints an atmosphere and mood. This distinction is important because the concept of mode involves how it elicits a particular emotional state. Modal music thus allows listeners to tap more into the spirit and sentiments contained in the music. This is less present in Western music, with the exception of certain styles. Modes borrowed from Greek music began being used in the Middle Ages in church music, particularly in Gregorian chants. During the early Renaissance period, Western music departed from the use of modes, though it resurfaced much later in some areas such as modal jazz, blues, and some rock. So now I'm going to demonstrate more the ethos by playing this chime. And I'd like you to listen to what kind of mood or emotions it elicits. Let's hear how some people, what kind of emotions you got.
It reminds me of when I was a baby.
Yeah, many people say that. Caramel truck. But it's a better song. Yes. Nostalgia. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Makes you feel kind of light.
Light. Yes.
The gift shop at the shore.
Yeah. Tender. Great. So let's hear a different one. This one has different group of notes. So that's all different emotions might be this. Okay, so let's hear some. Yeah?
My friend is late to a party and I'm waiting for him.
Okay. So not so happy. Yeah? Sadness. Mm-hmm.
Light on my feet.
Pardon?
Light on my feet.
Oh, light on his feet. Mm. Mystery, yes. Any more? Exotic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes. Light in a minor scale. So, yeah, one last? Wonder. Okay.
It was a little darker, more contemplative.
More contemplative, Yeah, a lot of people describe it as there's a sense of yearning, there's a gentle sadness, a healing sadness. So that's a different ethos, basically. Okay? So we respond to it, and I can't tell you how often people describe these two different chimes in the same way. That's what I heard. So the concept of tarab in Arab classical music. Now things are gonna develop more here. Tarab is a high level of euphoria, enchantment, or ecstasy achieved through judicious, attentive, and intentional listening or performing music. It is experienced throughout the Arab world during certain performances of classical Arab music, given by accomplished and sensitive musicians and experienced by both the audience and performers. Listening to recorded music can also induce tarab. A stock of words, expressions, and physical gestures are expressed by connoisseur listeners in the audience who may or may not be musicians, but have a command of the craft of listening. They understand the artistry involved in the musician's exploration of maqamat, and maqamat are Arabic modes, and possess a high level of sensitivity to and understanding of what is being played or sung by the performers. These listeners comment and react to not only the clearly virtuosic phrasings, but also the very subtle, delicate, and fleeting short musical expressions. The musicians who also share this experience rely highly on the presence of these judicious listeners to heighten and improve the performance, allowing them to give more to the audience and enjoy performing to a greater degree. In a sense, participatory listening demonstrates a state of attunement and shared resonance. So the same concept is found in many other cultures, especially ancient musical cultures, like Indian classical music, Turkish, Persian, music from North Africa, going all the way to Central Asia. We're going to develop all of this in few case studies. First one I want to talk about is a lady who died in 1975, probably one of the most famous performers to have ever lived, despite the fact that some of you may not know her. Can I see show of hands of how many people have heard of music or heard of her? A good number. Yeah, so Kulthum, that's her stage name, was born in 1904, died in 1975. Is an internationally famous Egyptian singer known as Star of the East. This is a great book written about her by Virginia Danielson. And a documentary was made after the book, and it has a slightly different title. It's called Kulthum, A Voice Like Egypt, which you can watch on Netflix or other sites. So I'm going to play now a short video excerpt of a performance. There are a lot of performances. You can watch them on YouTube, hundreds of different videos. I chose this one even though the sound and the video quality is not so great, because it's an outstanding performance that for me to really give justice to her and to her music, I chose the lesser visible, but the energy, the improvisation, and the interaction of the people in the audience is quite astounding. Just to give you a little bit about who Kulthum was and what kind of influence she had. So she came from a very modest family, from a peasant family, and her father worked very hard in training her, sending her to teachers, so that she studied singing. And when she was very young, she had to dress as a boy and sing, because her family was very traditional Muslim family. And it was not really widely known around the time that women are performers, and they didn't have a great reputation if they were performers. So with her artistry and her charisma and the power of her voice, she was able to become very well known and eventually incredibly influential on many people in politics, in commerce, in business. The most famous poets wrote lyrics for her, the most famous composers wrote music for her, the most famous musicians in Egypt played under her. And she played with an orchestra ranging from 15 to 30 musicians and toured all over the world. And the woman enjoyed an unrivaled, unequaled level of fame for many, many years, up until she died. It is known that in her funeral, 4 million people walked up to Tahrir Square, the second largest funeral after Abdel Nasser. She even had influence on Abdel Nasser and many high politicians. It is known that life came to a halt in the Middle East when she performed on the first Thursday of the month. This is the scale of what kind of performer she was. Why? What gave her this power? I mean, we're talking about a woman in an Islamic country, you know? What else? Music, the power of her voice. So what I'd like you to pay attention in this performance is the way she's improvising. What she's doing is called takasim. Takasim are not exactly like improvisation, they're more extemporized composition, because the performer, whether singer or instrumentalist, would approach each specific mode that has a specific intervallic structure, would approach it in a specific way and develop it in an almost scientific way, but prioritizing the emotions. So the technique is always put at the service of the emotions and what is being communicated, because the ultimate goal is to reach the audience and allow this separation between performer and audience to vanish. And this is why judicious listening and these stock of words and expressions that people shout and encourage and utter, which you'll hear plenty of them. This is not rude. This is heightening the mood in the performance. And you will see her laughing, being tickled at what she's doing. And she's playing with them, but she's pouring herself out and exciting them and causing them to get to a high level of euphoria, of ecstasy, which is tarab, basically. The musicians are following her on the step. They don't know what she's going to do. This is in a part where she's improvising around the melody. She's playing around with it. So you hear the musicians playing ornamented phrases, mimicking what she's doing or suggesting certain things, but basically supporting her. And she's definitely being the lead. So they're using a specific mode here. The composition is built on a specific mode called Saba, which has a very deep sense of yearning and nostalgia. For the musicians here, would be interested in knowing what the mode is. It's D, E half flat, F, G flat, A, B flat, C, and D flat on top. You don't go back to D. This is very unusual that the note on top is not the same as the note on the bottom. And the half flat is a note that is basically, you can only play on a fretless instrument. It's a note that's between the black and the white key on the piano. Arabic modes have a lot of microtones. These are called microtones. But that half flat is not always in the middle. It fluctuates a little higher, a little lower, depending on where you are in the scale, how you're approaching it. So it gets really complicated. So listen also to the ornamentation. Listen to the very subtle things that she's doing with her voice, because this is quite astounding, and especially for a musician, especially for a singer. And they're microtones. So it's very hard to keep good intonation when it's microtones.
غدرة وكنت
Yeah, it's a pity that the video is not of great quality, but must have been transferred from, who knows, VHS and over the years. This is probably from the late 50s. So she had a huge recording career. Every concert was just one song, very long song with different segments, and she would take the liberty in repeating different sections, adding things and changing the music, and no one managed this thing, whether the composer or the poet. And there was a great marriage of poetry and the scale, the mode that is being utilized, because, well, you heard the melancholy in this mode and the sense of yearning, and the words, the poetry was about unrequited love. She was known to bring out the life and the meaning in lyrics very much in the same way that Billie Holiday did, but if you know the two, you will know the difference. She did it in a way that's unequaled. She's really a musician's musician. It's astounding. I highly encourage you to get to know her music, because it's impossible to do these things. They're incredibly, incredibly hard. But what's fascinating is that what this artistry offered her, what she was able to do to people. And she's known to have impacted the elite intellectuals and the illiterate and the peasants in the same way. She was considered to be popular and classical at the same time. She bridged two sides that are not usually easy to bridge. I mean, she was commercial and classical. She sold more records than anybody. Everybody's still infatuated with her everywhere in the Middle East, and she traveled to Europe and gave many, many concerts in Asia. So, fascinating personality, but what's also even more interesting is how she impacted politics, and it became part of the fabric of anything in human life, and not just music. Her fame allowed her to become part of so many things that are extra musical that a normal performer would not do. Kind of like in the same way that Bono now is, or has been for a while. Well, she did it in the 50s. And this is very unusual. But this is what her artistry gave her, power that no one had. And this is a common manifestation that you would find with specifically Arabic music, that certain performers, there's another one, Munir Bashir, who was an oud player, which is an Arabic lute in Iraq, and he had dramatic command over someone like Saddam Hussein. Similarly, with a musician who's still alive, a singer, his name is Sabah Fakhri in Syria. Bashar Assad's father, Hafiz Assad, who was an inconspicuous dictator, was in love with Sabah's music, and Sabah had a great, decent level of authority. But this is what music can do. It's curious to investigate what gives people this power. What is in the music? What is it that they're doing that other performers elsewhere, especially in the West, are not doing, or maybe not equipped to do? Not equipped, is it on the technical level or on the theoretical or harmonic, the harmony that we have, So we're gonna unfold this little by little. The next example I'm gonna address is a specific style of Indian classical music called Drupad. Drupad is the most ancient style of Hindustani classical music of northern India, as opposed to Carnatic music of southern India, that has survived many centuries in its original form and still thrives as a major tradition of Indian culture. It is one of two classical singing styles in Hindustani music, and the second more popular Hindustani style is khayal or khayal, from the Arabic word imagination. Drupad music is spiritual in its nature, and its role is not to entertain, but to induce a contemplative and introspective feeling and mental state in the listener. Traditionally, it was sung in Hindu temples and later in royal courts. The word Drupad is derived from Dhruva, which is the evening star that moves through the sky, and Pada, which means poetry. Dhruva also has a different meaning. It refers to and emphasizes the circulatory construction of music. Dhruva means unmoving, and it implies the return of the swara, tone or note, kala, time, and shabda, speech or sound. Drupad is a form of devotional music that traces its origin to the ancient texts of Samaveda. The language used in Drupad singing used to be Sanskrit, but changed to Braj Bhasha, a Western Hindi dialect related to Hindustani. One significant characteristic of Drupad is the emphasis on maintaining purity of the ragas and the swaras, tones or notes. A raga or rag is a mode, scale, or set of notes with a specific intervallic structure that conveys a specific ethos. A rag is an exploration of musical sounds named swaras, notes, and shrutis, quarter tones or intervals. It is not the swaras that make the raga, but swaras are the result of shrutiyantar, intervals between the notes, set between various notes of the raga. Therefore, each and every swara of a rag must reflect the true character of the raga, because swaras are nothing but the derivatives of the raga. I want you to keep this in mind, that when we listen to two notes, we shouldn't put the emphasis on the two notes. It's the interval between the two. What is that? Musical ratio. It always comes down to mathematics. We're going to expand on this in a bit. The Sanskrit word shruti literally means that which is heard, but the meaning can change dependingly on context. It can mean hearing or listening, or the diagonal of a tetragon or polygon with four sides, or hypotenuse of a triangle. The word shruti is also found in ancient Indian music literature, where it means a particular division of the octave, a quarter tone or interval. Out of 22 enumerated major tones, minor tones, and semitones, in music it refers to the smallest measure of sound a human being can detect, and the set of 22 shrutis and 44 half shrutis stretching from about 250 hertz to 500 hertz is called the shruti octave. So as you see, it's incredibly complicated, and believe me, I made a great effort to simplify things, and it's an enormous work, because you don't want to simplify things too much to lose the magic. You don't want to water it down. You want to reduce it to a level where people can understand the gist of it. But once you start digging into this musical culture, you realize we're dealing with technology here. Sound is a technology. There was a very ancient and incredibly advanced science of working with sound that we lost. I know Western music very well. I was trained in it, and I love it, and I played it for most of my life. And I majored in theory, in composition. But once you start dealing with non-Western musical cultures, you move very, very slowly. And one thing leads to another, that leads to another, that becomes life. And as you see so far, that what we're dealing with is, in general, is very complex and dense and abstruse material, but also rich. And I wanted to give you the gist of things without complicating things too much, but without taking the magic out of it. So that's always very, very hard when talking about sound, especially the esoteric side of sound. And there's a great need for it, because people who are interested in sound, unfortunately, don't get to deal with this kind of substance. If you start to research things on the internet, it's very, very hard to get to substantial amount of data that is nurturing, informative, and true. There are a lot of unconfirmed rumors and wishful thinking and hooey and hokey things. And people rush into making assumptions without any scientific finding, where it's, let's investigate what we have, where there is an entire tradition built on such system, because this is the best evidence. It's what human beings have done for centuries and maybe thousands of years. The evidence is under our nose. This is how complex music and sound is. So the next concept that I'm going to address, and then we'll play a short video, is bhava and rasa. Bharata Muni was an ancient Indian theatrologist and musicologist who authored the Natya Shastra, a theoretical treatise on ancient Indian dramaturgy, the art of drama composition, that is, and histrionics, exaggerated dramatic behavior designed to attract attention. Now you know where these exaggerated dramas come from, Bollywood movies, especially Sanskrit theater. The Natya Shastra is dated somewhere between 200 BC and 200 AD. In this work, Bharata expands in details on bhava and rasa. Bhava, the term bhava means both existence and a mental state, and in aesthetic context, it has been variously translated as feelings, psychological states, and emotions. In the drama context, bhava are the emotions represented in the performance. Bhava is that which becomes, and bhava becomes rasa. In Natya Shastra, it is said that bhavas by themselves carry no meaning in the absence of rasa. Forms and manifestations of bhava are defined by the rasa. Rasa, the term rasa, Sanskrit literally juice or essence, unfortunately has no equivalent in the English language. But it can be translated as an essential mental state and is the dominant emotional theme of a work of art, or the primary feelings that is evoked in the person that views, reads, or hears such a work. Thus, it could be best translated as the aesthetic feeling that is created in the audience when they witness an effective presentation of the art. Creating rasa means to give aesthetic delight or to give an experience of ultimate bliss and happiness. Rasa is the emotional response. The bhavas inspire in the spectator or audience, the rasikas, this is what they're called, the rasikas or sarudaya. Rasa is also accompanied by feelings of pleasure and enjoyment. Such emotions tune the perception of the audience, create an atmosphere of empathy, make people more sensitive, and help to open the mind and heart to understand the idea and message behind the play. Rasa is associated with palate. It is delight afforded by all forms of art. and the pleasure that people derive from their art experience. It is literally the activity of savoring an emotion in its full flavor. The term might also be taken to mean the essence of human beings, feelings. So the next video that I'm going to play is by a very well-known Drupad singer. His name is Ustad H. Saiduddin Dagar. And this is a short excerpt about him. Ustad H. Saiduddin Dagar was born in 1939 in Alwar, Rajasthan, the largest state in northern India. He belongs to the unbroken lineage of illustrious Dagar family of Drupad music propagated by Baba Behram Khan Dagar of Jaipur. Jaipur is a city in Rajasthan. They represent the 19th and 20th generation of Dagar musicians who, since the mid-18th century, have managed to maintain this great cultural treasure. Today, Ustad Saiduddin Dagar spends at least 4 to 6 months in Europe teaching students in France, Holland, and Belgium, where there has been a growing interest in Indian traditional art forms, and especially Drupad. So I want to point out something that in many of these ancient musical cultures that are continuing today, it is common to find families of musicians who have been transmitting the knowledge, where anyone or practically anyone who's born to the Dagar family is going to sing or play something. This is something that has been happening for the longest time, and it's found in different continents. You find it a lot in Africa, North Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa. There's even culture around it, the griots, G-R-I-O-T, griot in French, basically is they're musicians who are born to families. If you're from, let's say, Mali, and you're from the Traoré family or the Diabaté or the Kouyaté family, you're going to do something in music. You're going to play, sing, make instruments, repair instruments, dance. And I've always wondered why this. So, of course, there is the seriousness side and transmitting the traditions. And sometimes musicians in these families, like the griots, for example, they don't deal just with music. First of all, they're outstanding musicians and dancers. But they also deal with the fabric of society. They continue traditions. They continue oral traditions in form of storytelling. They get invited to every occasion, whether it's a funeral or basically wedding or any celebration, and they recite the glory and the heritage of the person who is throwing the event to keep the traditions alive. But I'm interested in one side, which is now a great interest in science, which is the epigenetics. The epigenome, epi literally means above. It's part of the genome that can have an expression if certain conditions are found. For example, if a person, now scientists have been studying a lot of identical twins and figure out that two people who have the same genes, one may have a bad health, the other one has a good health. Why? What would cause one person to manifest an illness versus another? Well, there are many things that can affect the genes, and the epigenetic part of the gene, the above genetic, can manifest these things and can transmit information of what the parents, the grandparents, great-grandparents, and so on have done in their lifetime. All of that is encoded in the epigenome. So these families of musicians possibly exist because maybe human beings intuitively felt that, you know, this is how you preserve the culture, this is how you preserve the seriousness of the musicality transmitted, not to mention the support of the parents. And, you know, when you're talking about being trained in Indian classical music, you start at age 5 or 7. You go and live with your guru, with your teacher, and you play 10 to 15 hours a day, if not more. every day for many, many years. Why? Because this is how complex the music is. It's not just music as we know it in the West. It's not something you do on the side. It's beyond a commitment. Okay? So the two short excerpts that you're going to hear, and then we'll have a break. One is an alap, which is almost like an exploration of the potential of the rag, of the mode. What kind of emotions one can hear, one can feel in this rag. And you'll hear the singer gently exposing the properties, the emotional properties that are in this mode. And the second excerpt is a little more involved in faster movement. And you'll see Sayyiduddin Dagar singing, accompanied by three tanpura instruments, which are usually you see one. It's an instrument that you play is plucked strings, 4, sometimes 5 plucked open strings that you don't finger, you just pluck. And this plucking creates a buzzing sound while the string is ringing, because actually on the bridge there is a little thread that's squeezed between the bridge and the string. It's the place where the string rests on the bridge, so it creates the buzzing. And the buzzing creates the overtones. Why? So that the singer or instrumentalist, if they're playing, in this case it's just a singer, can hear the overtones and can tune the singing or the playing to the ratios that are in the overtones. This is a very, very important concept, to bring out the overtones, to hear them so that they can tune the interval, they can tune the note, and really zero in on the ethos of the rag. And I'm not going to start telling you about how the rag is explored. I'll be talking for the next 20 hours. It's incredibly complex. But just listen very attentively and notice the connection between his singing and the tampura sound in the back.
Gala Kalasha Dwama Madanu Ben Bajata Kalasha Dwama Kunda Madanu Bena Bajata Gaya Yaddan Toitala Yaddan Toitala Tila Tulana Lambaro Panikra Pulikitam Vabhushitam Jete Bhusmin Yasmin Basma Vase
Pretty magical. So he was singing using a rag called Bhopali, which is a pentatonic scale. It's a mode that has 5 notes in it. And you probably noticed the hand gestures. Indian musicians do this frequently. Why? Because the music moves you. And sometimes you almost become transfigured, completely transformed, and you want to do something else that will define, express, give music justice, and the hand comes at play. And there are probably other reasons I'm not mentioning, but it's common to see this. Sometimes they almost seem like they're having a dialogue with someone who's not there, but it makes sense. It's just the way the music is moving him. The next short excerpt is a little more involved, a little faster stuff. The next section is about Sufism. The word Sufi, which is derived from the concept tasawwuf, denotes the esoteric currents in Islam, which aim at seeking mystic union and the experience of the dissolution of the self in the divine essence. Sufis describe the state in the word al-fana, with a glottal stop at the end, which means vanishing or the dissolving. These currents appeared in the 8th century AD, and since they have continued to multiply in various forms in the Islamic world. Both the word tasawwuf and Sufi contained the root suf, which means wool, and referred to the rough woolen garment originally worn by the ascetic as a token of their detachment. The great mystic and philosopher Al-Ghazali, born circa 1058, died 1111, defined this aim as follows: to renounce the world in order to lead the life of an ascetic by ridding oneself of material bonds, by emptying the heart of its earthly concerns, and by approaching Almighty God with perfect spiritual diligence. The performance that we're gonna watch is by El Kindi Ensemble with a very well-known singer. He died in 2009. His name is Sheikh Hamza Shakour. The Al-Kindi ensemble was founded in 1983 by the French qanun player, which is an Arab sitter. His name is Julien Jalaluddin Weiss. He converted to Sufism, and Jalaluddin is his adopted name, who has been living in Aleppo, Syria for over 30 years. The aim of this ensemble is to preserve, record, and perform Arab classical music and Sufi music. Sheikh Hamza Shakour, born in Damascus in 1947 and died in 2009, is a mukri, which is a Quran reader, and munshid, hymnodist, in Quran recitation. And this is basically where the secrets and the knowledge of Arabic music comes from the people who read the Quran. They do the call for prayers. But there are 3 different levels of them, and each one has a different set of knowledge and technique, basically. He was a master singer of the classical Arab repertoire and the Sufi repertoire. Al-Kindi, born in 801 and died 873, just to give you an idea of why this ensemble was called Al-Kindi, was an Iraqi Muslim Arab philosopher, mathematician, physician, and musician. He is unanimously hailed as the father of Islamic or Arabic philosophy for his synthesis, adaptation, and promotion of Greek and Hellenistic philosophy in the Muslim world. Al-Kindi wrote hundreds of original treatises of his own on a range of subjects, ranging from metaphysics, ethics, logic, and psychology, to medicine, pharmacology, mathematics, astronomy, astrology, and optics, and further afield to more practical topics like perfumes, swords, jewels, glass, dyes, zoology, tides, mirrors, meteorology, and earthquakes. So, quite an accomplished and versatile scholar. So, the ensemble that you're gonna watch in a bit has a few instrumentalists, 2 percussion players, one playing a rick, which is small tambourine, one playing frame drum, and Julia, the founder of the ensemble, is playing this instrument, qanun. It's a block zither that has 98 strings. And there's a ney player, which is an end-blown reed flute. I forwarded this performance. It's going to start somewhere in the middle, somewhere where it's really happening. And you will see the 4 whirlers coming and saluting the sheikh. He's sitting here and saluting the audience. And little by little, they start to whirl. Now, a very interesting thing here that happens is that during this whole time, they were sitting and contemplating and letting the music move them and feeling the tarab, which is the ecstatic state. And eventually they stand up and start to whirl. And they whirl in a very particular way. So notice how their left foot is always stationary and it's pivoting, and it's the right foot that goes around. So there's one axis that is always the same so that they don't get dizzy. And also, the dresses that they're wearing will provide a certain weight on the spin that will help centering them. But it's still a very, very difficult practice. But it contributes so much, the spinning action contributes so much to what people are experiencing as they're listening to the music. They're accentuating the power of music.
ملائكة السماء فرحت سرورا بمولد من تظلل بالغمام نبي الله نبي الله نبي الله يا خير البرايا نبي الله يا خير البرايا فأنت شفيعنا يوم الزحام آمين يا إمام الرسل يا سندي أنت باب الله معتمدي وبدنياي وآخرتي يا رسول الله يا إمامي يا سندي أنت باب الله معتمدي وبدنياي وآخرتي يا رسول الله 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 الله
Quite ecstatic. If you one day get a chance to attend a Sufi performance or whirling dervishes, it's astounding. So, so this is an order from Syria. You can find orders in Turkey, in Jordan, in Egypt. And of course, the language we're using here is Arabic. And I want to draw an attention here to the melodic mode was the same throughout the mode or the scale. However, the rhythmic mode changed. And in a lot of these ancient musical culture, you have two parameters. Indian music, Persian, Turkish, and Arabic, the two modes, one melodic and one rhythmic. And there's always kind of a greater value attached to the melodic mode, because it's the melodic mode that has the different musical ratios. The rhythmic mode has more the rhythmic ratios that deal with time. So in this case, they played various songs in a medley form, and they preserved the melodic mode, but the rhythmic mode changed. But that does not throw off the whirlers, the people who are present, the musicians or the audience members, everyone. As long as the melodic mode is preserved, if they were to switch to a different one in the next song, things will fall apart. This is widely known, whether you're in India or in the Arab world, that you preserve the tonality. Why? Because it takes time for the body and mind and the heart to get adjusted to these microtonalities. Of course, the scale that they were using has microtones, and the ornamentations also are very important. The different tone color of the instruments that are being utilized. I don't know if you noticed that all the musicians, the melodic instruments are playing the same melody but with different ornamentation, which creates a new texture. It's called heterophony. People who know music know about three textures, which are monophony, when everybody's playing the same tune. Same way we sing Happy Birthday without any fancy harmonization. Homophony, where there's a principal melody supported by harmony. And polyphony, which is like the music of Bach, where you have two or more lines going simultaneously, each of equal importance. If you have different people playing or singing the same melody but with different ornamentation, that creates heterophony, and that's often used, whether with melodic instruments or rhythmic instruments. And that can also heighten the mood. So the next example is Byzantine or Greek Orthodox chant. Byzantine music is, in a narrow sense, is the music of the Byzantine Empire. Originally, it consisted of songs and hymns composed to Greek texts used for courtly ceremonials, during festivals, or as paraliturgical and liturgical music. The ecclesiastical forms of Byzantine music are the best known forms today because different Orthodox traditions still identify with the heritage of Byzantine music. When their cantors sing monodic chant out of the traditional chant book, like the Sticharion, which in fact consisted of 5 books. Byzantine music did not disappear after the fall of Constantinople. Its traditions continued under the Patriarchate of Constantinople, which was annexed by the Islamic Ottoman ruler Sultan Mehmed II in 1454, and granted administrative responsibilities over all Orthodox Christians. The new self-declared patriarchates were independent nations defined by their religion. In this context, Christian religious chant practiced in the Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria, and Greece, among other nations, was based on the historical roots of the art tracing back to the Byzantine Empire, while the music of the Patriarchate created during the Ottoman period was often regarded as post-Byzantine. This explains why Byzantine music refers to several Orthodox Christian chant traditions of the Mediterranean and the Caucasus practiced in recent history. Here you'll see a very unique system of notation that still to this day Byzantine music has. This is a text in Greek, and above you see these symbols, which would instruct the people who are singing in a choir or soloist what to do, where to start on what note, and once you're on that note, where to go. A second higher or lower, a minor third, and so on. So it's very important to keep your pitch reference, because all the symbols are based on where you start from. And this is a sheet that has all of the Byzantine musical symbols. So it's a whole other language, completely different than the music notation system that we know. So Byzantine music uses 8 modes, and these are the modes, and they're also microtonal. As you know by now, they've been affected by Turkish music and some Arabic music, and they can induce also this ethos that I refer to in the ecstatic state. So the performance that we're gonna watch is by person who's an amazing chanter of this music, who's originally from the Middle East, but he lives in Ottawa, Canada. And this particular hymn is sung in Christmas time. Notice the function of the drone.
اليوم يولد من البتول الضابط الخليقة بأسرها بقبضته اليوم يولد من البتول الضابط الخليقة بأسرها في قبضته اليوم يولد من البتول الضابط الخليقة بأسرها في قبضته الذي هو بجوهره غير ملموس يدرج في الأقمطة كطفلين الإله الذي ثبت السماوات قديما منذ البدء يتكئ في مزود الذي أمطر للشعب منان في القاف يقتدي من الثديين لبنا ختن البيعة يستدعي المجوس وابن العذراء
يستقبل منهم الهدايا نسجد لميلادك أيها المسيح نسجد لميلادك أيها المسيح نسجد لميلادك أيها المسيح فأرنا ظهورك الإلهي.
So there are many examples I can play, whether from North Africa or Central Asia. Unfortunately, I'm limited to the time, but I want to emphasize one thing, that religion doesn't always connect with this music, because and this microtonality, where most people think that is associated with Islam, not necessarily slow. So yes, Islamic music made great use of it, and it's found a lot in the Middle East, but it's not a Muslim thing, because there are a lot of Jews from North Africa, from Tunisia, Egypt, from Algeria, from Syria and Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, who have played this music. So please do not associate it with Islam. Yes, the majority of the countries where you can find this kind of music, these countries are Muslim, but it's not just connected to Islam. Christian and Jews and atheists and people from other religions and ancient Mesopotamian religions that are still surviving, like Manichaeism and Yazidis and so on, they also make use of this music. What seems to some of my observation is that basically this is an ancient way of dealing with music that we kind of lost in the West, but is still surviving in a band, basically. And this band stretches from North Africa through the Near East, Middle East, going all the way to Central Asia. And there's a large community of Bukharan Jews in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan who have preserved this maqam music that functions with all of these properties that I was talking about in mind. The ethos, microtonality, non-equal tempered scales, ornamentation, absence of harmony as we know it, which is tertial harmony that we have in the West. Basically, you build chords based on intervals of thirds. Let's say you want to build a C major chord, you start on C, you skip D, go to E, that's your third, major third. And then you skip F, go to G. If you want to play seventh chord, you add another third on top, or 9th, 11th, 13th chords used in jazz, so on and so forth. This does not exist in the rest of the world. This is a new thing that started in the 11th and 12th century with primarily two musicians, composers, Léonin and Perrotin, in what became known as the Notre Dame School in Paris, Notre Dame Cathedral. Perrotin was also a monk, and they started experimenting with adding notes that provided consonants to an already existing melody. And organum, this is the style that came out of it. And basically experimenting with adding notes on the bottom of the melody, providing support. Little by little, these notes became more elaborate. They added more lines, took a few centuries, and we got the harmony that we know, which is still surviving. There's nothing wrong about it. It's tremendously beautiful. But this is not the way harmony is supposed to function. Why? Because this harmony that we have in the West would only work if you're dealing with equal tempered scales and octaves. And if you have that, you lose the microtonality. And the states of trance, of enchantment, the altered states that we experience from sound, through sound, that I showed in Indian music, Sufi, Arabic, and Greek Orthodox chants, and Gregorian chants, same, is all based on modal music, where harmony as we know it doesn't exist. If you want to insert this, you're going to have to adjust the scales, adjust the octaves, you lose microtonality, and music would affect us less. Why? Because it has different mathematics. Comes down to mathematics at the end. Well, one would wonder, did these religions capitalize on the power of sound? This is a very important question. There is clear evidence that yes. Why? Because human beings everywhere, I didn't even start talking about shamanic music. Things go really wild there. But they don't deal with the microtonality and the sophisticated system. There's a different level of sophistication in the music that was used in shamanism. I'm sorry, I'm not including it here because there's too much I can address and we're limited to time. So we as human beings go to these altered states. Every time we're dealing with powerful music source, creating a ritual around an event or ceremony with specific intention. So whether the person is really thinking of this God or that prophet and this and that, I think we go to the same hyperspace, let's call it. And there's a lot that we can do there. And religions seem to have capitalized on what sound does to us. There's also clear evidence of the attention that was given to building holy spaces, the architecture, the acoustics, especially the Knights Templars, building Gothic cathedral, the play of light and stained glass and the profuse ornamentation, the incense burned, the music. What is that? I mean, it's shamanic ceremony functions in the same way. You just tweak things connected to the senses. And whether you're praying to Jesus or to Moses or to anyone else, you know, it's sound moving us. So this is something that I've been investigating, going deeper and deeper. Of course, here I don't mean to offend anyone, any religious people, but I want people to become aware of the power of sound on human consciousness. Look what we've done with music. You know, it's the most popular art. There's a reason why. But we in the West scratch the very superficie of it. And it can go a lot deeper. I'm not saying that our music is meaningless. It's fantastic. But this is where it starts. And that's the problem. We stop at the start and thinking that, oh, it's not going to go deeper. Yeah. So next I'm going to talk a little bit about electroencephalography. I wanted to test a little bit the power of sound and instruments to see their effects on the brain by measuring the electrical activity. Before I go into this, I want to talk a little bit about brainwave cycles. The brain has 5 gears. Let's call them 5 gears, 5 different brain waves or cycles. The delta state, where the brain is operating on somewhere between 0.1 and 4 hertz, deeply asleep and not dreaming. The theta state, 4 to 8 hertz, it's a meditative, drowsy, and drifting down into sleep and dreams. Alpha, 8 to 13, awake but mentally relaxed. Beta, 12 to 30, alert, busy, concentrating, and engaged in activities. Gamma state, 30 to 100, hyperbrain activity, which is great for learning and creating. So throughout the day, the brain switches between different states, but sometimes couple of states going simultaneously, a couple of cycles, brainwave cycles. And I wanted to test instruments that are often used in sound therapy. A lot of people call that sound healing. I tend to disagree with the use of the term sound healing because it's not a just way of describing what these instruments do. Sound healing communicates passivity. Sound healing can be misinterpreted. A lot of people think that the practitioner heals them with sound, which is not true. Some people think that sound heals them, they don't have to do anything, and they can just sit and run through their laundry list. That's not true either. Sound is a tool that we work with, and one's awareness and engagement in the experience is very, very important to benefit from sound, to establish a state of equanimity, a deep meditative state, and so on. I'll talk about this later on in a different slide. But I wanted to test some of the instruments that I used in sound therapy, which are gongs of various traditions, types, and diameters, the voice, singing bowls, Himalayan or crystal bowls, bells, metallic discs, chimes, and so on. I wanted to mention something else, that the church bell is an instrument that can create a lot of overtones. I don't know if you noticed that. It's like a gigantic Himalayan singing bowl. It's quite mesmerizing. So I'll leave it to your imagination where I would go with that. So this is the baseline of my subject. This is the left hemisphere. This is the right hemisphere. It's almost like in a 3D, so the activities start right here and they move up. And this is a span of about 6 seconds. So the brainwave cycles are on the bottom, 0, 20, I don't know if you can see it from the back, but where you have activities, basically you can figure out what brainwave cycle you're in. And the blue color means no electrical activity, green color, little more electrical activity, and then you have red, yellow, and white. The highest peaks are white, and everything is measured using microvolts, these lines right here. This is 0 microvolt, 10 microvolt, 20 microvolt. Microvolt is approximately 1 millionth of a volt. Okay? So the person here is laying down, eyes closed, wearing shades, not listening to any music. But obviously, the mind is busy, as always. The monkey mind. I play a large gong and everything flattens. Very little electrical activity. To neuroscientists, the person is sleeping, but actually not. The person is thoughtless, because the sound of the gong is somehow affecting the person's awareness. Open fifth, most powerful interval, C to G, fifth, or you can play D to A, that's still a fifth, so basically C, D, E, F, G. Very quiet brain as well. Small Vietnamese gong that I use. You have just little minor eruption, but nothing of a big deal. So keep in mind that this electrical activity is happening on the surface layer of the brain. And there are 6 different layers. We don't really know what's happening there. So EEG is great and it informs us a lot, but not everything, because there are 5 other layers to investigate. Small Japanese bell using loud dynamics. Because there's a big difference between soft and loud, and this is the difference. Soft dynamic. Now, notice that these are not sharp peaks. This is not discursive thinking, useful or non-useful. This is the limbic system, the emotions, because it's happening in the lower range, basically in the delta and the theta state. This is 0 to 4 hertz, 4 to 8. So it's very important to keep track of these numbers on the bottom in both hemispheres, left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. And of course, you can measure the intensity with these microvolts here, we're going off the charts. So emotions, dealing with emotions is very important during a sound work or in shamanic work. I'll show you later on something else. This is a shruti box, the instrument that you saw and heard earlier. Quiets the mind quite a bit as well. This is a frame drum, and frame drum has overtones in it. I wanted to understand why drumming circles are powerful. What do they do? It's not just the rhythms that are being played. It's also the overtone of whatever drum is being used that is affecting the brain. Of course, a drum does not have harmonic overtone range as pronounced as, say, a gong or Himalayan singing bowl, but it's quite significant. So what's important here is the synchrony that you have in both hemispheres. It's almost the same. It's toned down, it's active, but it's contained, and it's quite similar, left to right. So this is a chakapa, which is a bunch of dry leaves that shamans in the Amazon use. They tap the person on the body, and has a specific texture and sound, but at the same time, it's tactile, and at the same time, it has a scent, the scent of dry leaves. So 3 things are involved here: the tactile, the olfactory, and the auditory. And this is Palo Santo, wood from the Amazon that is used in ceremonies, ayahuasca ceremonies and others. Talking about off the charts. And here we're in the lower states. This is the delta state and the theta. And the activity is happening in the lower. So this is the limbic system. Again, changing the emotional state is very important for the person's healing or therapy. So it's not just the instruments, it's also the olfactory stimuli. In my studies, I wanted to understand why shamans use a lot of olfactory stimuli, be it wood that they burn, and incense, and sometimes oils. And what are the connection with the instruments that they play? I can talk about this for a long time, but I don't want to make this talk about shamanism, although that would be very fascinating. But, so we go on. So I wanted to understand how significant what I was researching was, and to test it in some way. I mean, I've been playing for a long, long time, and I studied various things in music, and I'm very passionate about it, but I wanted to see how one can bridge that with the holistic practices that I've been interested in for a very long time. I started meditating at the age of 14, have been very serious at it, and later started practicing yoga long before yoga became hip. It was weird to practice yoga then. And to create a protocol to test it on people, because if this material that I'm researching is not testable, then it's useless. If it's just in my mind and no one else experiencing the same thing that I'm experiencing, then it's also probably less useful. So I wanted to create a setting that I call sound meditation, which is an integrated practice that combines a shamanic ceremonial setting with emphasis on Eastern practices, basically mindfulness primarily, and visualization is another. And basically the elements are mindset or intention, to come to the experience with specific intention, to have a comfortable and quiet setting, to involve the person in meditative state, to use breathing exercises, to use visualization and guided visualization, to use verbal guidance to bring awareness to what may be happening in the person's mind, heart, or happening outside. You know, words have great power in changing the person's mindset. Toning and vocalization, working with overtone emitting instruments. These are the instruments that I use in sound therapy or sound healing. And a very important aspect, which is applying judicious and equanimous listening, attentive listening, and being really present with the sound and with the experience. I wanted to engage the person in the experience. and not just to play these instruments without the person being an active participant. Because the person may be sitting or laying there and their mind is running around, and I'm doing all this work, but the person's not going to benefit. There is no magic. We create magic with the tools. So the person's attention is incredibly important. So let's talk a little bit about meditation. And you will be surprised to find some things here that you didn't realize that they're encompassed in meditation. The etymology of the word meditation is derived from the Latin meditatio, from the verb meditare, which means to think, to ponder, or to contemplate. Meditation is a practice meant to bring a level of awareness to the nature of the mind and the mind's activities. During meditation, an individual trains the mind to concentrate on a single point, whether an object, the breath, a mantra, etc., in order to ease mental activity and induce a state of well-being. It has been practiced since antiquity and has been a component of many religious traditions and spiritual philosophies, as well as in holistic practices. Another focus of meditation may involve delving into a particular emotional state, such as fear, anger, shame, self-pity, etc., in order to analyze and understand that state and to learn to disconnect from it on the root level. The objective here is to disengage from one's tendency to generate such state and to break undesirable habitual patterns of the mind. The ultimate goal of meditation is to be attentive to the sensory experience rather than to one's thoughts on the sensory experience. Direct awareness inwards results in what meditators describe as being awake inside without being aware of anything except awareness itself. Contrary to common belief, the practice of meditation is not to empty the mind, but rather to refrain from becoming engrossed in discursive thoughts that enter our consciousness, and to train ourselves to do this in a non-meditative state as well. A constant barrage of random thoughts can cause mental fatigue by overrunning the mind. This eventually begins to distract and disconnect us from our environment, making us more prone to misinterpreting and misjudging situations, projecting past experiences onto the present, and unnecessarily expending metabolic energy. This fatigue can also make the mind less sensitive to what the body is experiencing in the present. Through self-regulating the mind, meditation offers numerous benefits on the mental, emotional, and physical levels, quieting and clearing the mind, developing compassion, patience, love, kindness, generosity, and forgiveness, and easing health issues such as high blood pressure, anxiety, and depression. I love this quote. Meditation is the discovery that the point of life is always arrived at in the immediate moment. Alan Watts. This is a great quote as well. The function of music is to release us from the tyranny of conscious thought. Sir Thomas Beecham, well-known conductor. I work on about 1,000 people in the beginning, giving them free sessions to understand what they're going through, because I wanted feedback of other people other than what I'm experiencing, to give me feedback. It's almost like doing field work with people, testing things on them and asking them for experience sharing and feedback to figure out how people with different mindset, people with different professions can experience something that I seem to be reacting with well. Musicians, scientists, people into holistic practices, shamanic practices, or people with just various jobs, different age groups and so on. And I've worked with so far over 8,000 people, and I've received about, over 900 emails of experience sharing. And these are very, very important emails that I'm still analyzing, but these are some of the benefits that came out of them. Quieting the mind, to enable participants to disengage their undesirable habitual patterns, emotional, energetic, intellectual, and physical, to empower positive cognitive change, quitting antidepressants and managing depression, considerable diminishing of anxiety and panic attacks, to access and release traumas, to bring the self into a state of inner peace and calmness, to establish a state of resonance and attunement with the self, enhancing one's state of presence and self-awareness, to exercise a state of equanimity and no judgment, to fine-tune self-observation, increasing self-confidence and attention, enhancing one's ability to listen, focus, and gaining attention to a greater level of details, improving dynamics between couples, dealing with insomnia, triggering and enhancing one's ability to dream. Some of the benefits of working with sound on the mental or emotional level. This is also some things that I've compiled from my personal experiences and people's experiences, people I've worked with, that sound healing is really a generic term. It's almost gimmicky. There's a lot more complexity happening. And I think it's very important to educate the receiver and to bring this awareness and not to let them think that there is some magic that is happening without their participation. But once the person's focus is engaged, then it's a whole other level of benefits. So sound enhances our self-awareness. It facilitates connecting with the higher self. It promotes self-observation and self-worth. It increases the state of personal resonance. It brings awareness to the inner process of the mind, the habitual patterns, the good and bad discursive thinking, the judgment, the filters through which we experience the inner and the outer worlds and realities. It promotes and facilitates the process of inner transformation, which is a Gnostic idea. It is a tool for self-exploration, consciousness expanding, self-maintenance, self-therapy, and self-healing. It is a great tool for self-inquiry. It promotes acting with pure intentions, and it facilitates a heightened state of awareness and presence. It promotes an increased state of empathy, compassion, and love toward the self and others. It brings awareness to how much the inner reality is connected to and impacts the outer reality. This is something that I'm very interested in, the nature of reality, where reality is, and how much of reality is a biocentric process. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to talk about this right now. So technique to keep your awareness on the sound, judiciously listen to the overtones, become aware of the space between the overtones. Explore the different register of the overtones. Observe the varying modulation, which is the wobble or the beats that are in the overtone, the speed of different overtones, basically. Notice their varying dynamics. Visualize opening oneself to the sound and merge with it. Contemplate the shifting energy of the overall sound and of the overtones. Allow yourself to be completely engrossed in the sound to an extent where anything outside of that which you're observing would cease to exist. This is where you become the event and there's no more awareness of the observer. Going deep into the sound until you reach a time-stopping ecstasy. So the point here is to engage the mind in exploring what's in the sound. What makes the sound sound the way it does? Basically, the mind is unstoppable, and it's impossible to stop the thought process. Meditators know this. It's very hard to still the mind. If we use sound as a tool, and this is why we use mantras and sutras, or focus on the breath, all of these are tools to focus the awareness on them. The more complex the tool is, the more the person is likely to quiet the mind, because then the mind becomes busy exploring what is in that tool. And then we busy the mind, we're tricking the mind basically in making it busy exploring something that is powerful, something that is so abstract, something that moves us, literally. Sound is air pressure. And the more complex the harmonic system in the instrument, the more of different levels of complexity, different mathematics, overtones, physics of sound, which is quite astounding. And I've been learning about it from friends of mine, specifically one friend of mine who's an acoustician, he's here, Terence. Terence is still here. I don't know, maybe he left by now. So there are so many things that we don't understand about sound and music, but it's very important to tackle them and approach them using multidisciplinarity, and that's the approach that I've taken here. You probably noticed that I'm not just talking about music, but something of this magnitude, we need to approach it using all the tools that we have, from neuroscience to biochemistry and physics and mathematics, because we're dealing with very advanced technology that nature gave us, that the ancients knew so much about, and somehow that knowledge was lost, remained lurking around, explored to different levels of depth. Unfortunately, in the West, we made great pop and a few other things that are great, but we shouldn't forget that the music that we have in the West, as beautiful as it is incapacitated. But that's what we do as human beings. We even create something magical even in the most incapacitated medium. And the more you know about these cultures, musical cultures that I talked about and played, the more you realize the level of complexity which goes well beyond what I'm expressing. Phenomenology and ontology are both branches in philosophy, and I studied philosophy and influenced a lot the way I experience things and the way I think about things, and I promote that, and it has been very, very useful to people. Phenomenology is a study of the structures of experience and consciousness. It is primarily concerned with the systematic reflection on and study of the structures of consciousness and the phenomena that appears in acts of consciousness. Some prominent phenomenologists are Heidegger, Hegel, Merleau-Ponty, Sartre, Husserl, Stumpf, Schütz, and so on. Ontology is the philosophical study of the nature of being, becoming, existence, or reality, as well as the basic categories of being and their relations. Aristotle, Avicenna, Al-Ghazali, Aquinas are some of the prominent ontologists. So what I promote is being engaged in an experience, fully engaged, and do nothing but that. That, once again, will disempower the mind in wandering around. So I encourage people to explore things and ask, where is the experience coming from? How is it unfolding? How can what I'm experiencing be used in a beneficial, positive, constructive, therapeutic, healing, and revealing way? What am I learning about myself? Which side of myself is being revealed? Why and how? Where does this side dwell? Could what I'm experiencing be a higher self-awareness, self-realization, the divine within? Where are the normal baseline thoughts? Where did the normal discursive thinking go, the monkey mind? Where did the word I know go? How could it be replaced by what I'm witnessing in such an effective way? And so on and so forth. So this will allow the person to be really present, because their presence is what I'm looking for. So I also talk about some things that cautionary notes, basically, that people who work with sound must be aware of to inform and educate yourself and learn about what's out there that you didn't know it existed and which can be very useful to you. Receive sound work and find new ways to experience it and enhanced ways to understand, absorb, and to articulate the experience. Use the phenomenological approach. Write down and collect various observations you make. Meditate and reflect on them. Remember that it is all about an inner process of transformation. Inform the people you're working with before you offer them the experience so they can be active participants. Do not capitalize on what the sound does. This is a very important point. Allow them and remind them to own the experience and to feel self-empowered. When we don't understand what is happening in the sound and how to experience it best, and a person comes and plays these instruments, and all of a sudden we go into an altered state, we experience something really powerful. If we don't know enough about it, we're going to think that the experience came from the practitioner, not through the practitioner. And this is something that happens a lot. with gurus and shamans and religious authorities that there are different people with bad intention or without bad intention. Sometimes we hand them this. We give them our power and we allow them to capitalize on what the medium is allowing us to experience. So be aware of what feeds your ego in a negative way and hinders your own process. Spot and stay away from gimmicks, dogmas, cult, hooey and hokey stuff, unconfirmed rumors, wishful thinking, wishful believing, myths and fables. I think I covered them all. There's so many hooey things in sound, it's ridiculous, which is unfortunate because it's becoming popular, but with a very, very shallow ground. That's not what we want. We want people to be informed. We want more people to work with sound, but to be great thinkers and to empower others and not to use this power to uplift themselves. And next thing, we form dogmas and cults, the things that we're running away from. We manifest them again. This is lack of awareness. So be super cautious with spiritual materialism. Very important point as well. There's a great book written about this by Chogyam Trungpa. It's called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. I highly encourage you to read it. Think and observe carefully before you exteriorize the experience. Many people, when they have a deeply impactful shamanic experience, they right away talk about spirits and entities and things. Well, maybe there's a different way to talk about these spirits. Maybe there's a different way to address them in a way that would align with what Hinduism is about. The thousands of gods are all archetypes, they're not really gods. Buddhism is the philosophy of the mind. The shamanic model works in a different way. Remember, these are all models. And human beings everywhere in the world are talking about the same thing. We just use different models and different jargon and different ways of describing the same thing. So it's very important to have a different way to look at things in a way that would align with Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism, and maybe Western science, and not to exteriorize things. When we encounter part of the higher self, that first tendency, when we encounter something that we don't know, we think it's the other. We think it's outside of us. That in psychology is called exteriorization. And in my field work, I've encountered this in manifesting in different ways in different continents. This is not to create a reductionist theory that, oh, it's very simple. No, 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 no. I think that the way people talk about shamanic experience is reductionism as well. Because the truth is far more complicated than we're able to fathom and understand. But we don't want to disengage the self from it. We don't want to disempower the self. We want experiences that would empower the individual and get to learn about who we are beyond the veil of what we know, beyond of what the conditioning that we had caused us to create a belief. And this is where everything starts, with a belief. So, be skeptical, not doubtful. Being skeptical is very healthy. Being doubtful, the person kind of, if one is doubtful, one kind of seems like already made his or her mind. One is expressing negativity. Skeptical expresses that I'm interested in this, but I need more data. I need the person to prove it more, so I need to investigate it more. Avoid using stock words and expressions that are a la mode these days, and try to find a more meaningful way to articulate what they intend to communicate. Meditate on what intentions you have before you do anything significant. Okay, sound is the medicine of the future. This is what Edgar Cayce said. Is it? Sure seems like it. So these are some current medical and scientific uses of sound. Scientists now can use ultrasound to induce an opening in the blood-brain barrier, which has a highly selective permeability that separates the circulating blood from the brain extracellular fluid in the central nervous system. This barrier allows the passage of water, some gases, and lipid-soluble molecules by passive diffusion, as well as the selective transport of molecules such as glucose and amino acids that are crucial to neural function. This exciting discovery will help millions of people who suffer from Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, and amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. Worldwide, these 4 diseases account for more than 20 million patients. Although great progress has been made in recent years toward understanding of these diseases, few effective treatments and no cures are currently available. This is mainly due to the impermeability of the blood-brain barrier that allows only 5% of the 7,000 small molecule drugs available to treat only a tiny fraction of these diseases. Another one, a team of researchers from the Queensland Brain Institute in Australia have come up with a non-invasive ultrasound technology that clears the brain neurotoxic amyloid plaques, structures that are responsible for memory loss and a decline in cognitive function in Alzheimer's patients. This new Alzheimer's treatment will fully restore memory function with zero damage to the surrounding brain tissue. If a person has Alzheimer's disease, it's usually the result of a buildup of 2 types of lesions, amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tangles. Amyloid plaques sit between the neurons and end up as dense clusters of beta amyloid molecules, a sticky type of protein that clumps together and form plaques. Ultrasound can be used in male contraception these days. George Mason University in Virginia created a device, a few students in George Mason, sorry, it's a typo, that can put out fire with nothing but sound. Scientists can now use sound or acoustic levitations for various applications. Researchers from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign have experimentally demonstrated using sound through a phenomenon called the Brillouin scattering-induced transparency to slow down, speed up, and block light in an optical waveguide, so on and so forth. So, also there's a way of detecting cancer cells using sound because it's quicker to recognize them than to look at them and scrutinize, and it's proven to be more accurate. This is fascinating. Discovery of quantum vibrations in microtubules inside brain neurons, EEG rhythms, derive from deeper level microtubules vibrations, and treating brain microtubule vibrations with particularly microtonal sound could benefit a host of mental, neurological, and cognitive conditions. A quote from the article: consciousness depends on enharmonic vibrations of microtubules inside neurons, similar to certain kinds of Indian music, but unlike Western music, which is harmonic. The musicians here, please don't confuse enharmonic with a E-N in the beginning spelling with A-N, enharmonic. Enharmonic overtones are overtones that are not based on doubling the frequency. So that's different from harmonic overtones. There's harmonic overtones and enharmonic overtones, and they're very, very complex. A microtubule is a microscopic tubular structure present in numbers in the cytoplasm of cells. The cytoplasm is a thick solution that fills each cell and is enclosed by the cell membrane and surrounds the nucleus, sometimes aggregating to form more complex structures. These tubular polymers of tubulin can grow as long as 50 micrometers and are highly dynamic. The outer diameter of a microtubule is about 25 nanometer, while the inner diameter is about 14 nanometer. Micrometer is 1 millionth of a meter, nanometer is 1 billionth of a meter. So this is what they look like. So the nucleus is in the middle, and all of these are microtubules. There's a whole new science about microtubules, and it's utterly fascinating. So, Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.